Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Imperial Guard Mordian Glory video. So today's tactical video we're going to be looking at platoons. Now I know platoons are not officially in Warhammer 8th edition Imperial Guard anymore, but I have found myself tending to organise my men into a platoon-like formation, and not only do I find this to be quite fluffy, but I also find it to be quite effective. Now, for those of you that are unfamiliar, maybe those of you which have joined Guard in 8th edition, back in the day in 7th edition and before, the platoon was quite a unique aspect of the Imperial Guard. It was a very unique way of us putting units onto the field, which meant that we were able to bring a minimum of 2 squads and a command squad with an officer for a single troop choice. Now, unfortunately, we can't do that anymore, which is both a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because it means we have a lot more flexibility. The platoon was a rather rigid structure that we were forced to take. But I think since its demise at the beginning of 8th edition, I honestly feel like that is what's caused the Imperial Guard to be so overpowered. People are able to abuse things and take spammy conscripts that have to take the tax that used to surround them. Because you didn't used to be able to take conscripts unless you took a minimum of a basic platoon, being 2 infantry squads and a command squad and a commander. Now, I always found the platoon to be quite good because it forced Imperial Guard commanders to generally take quite a balanced force. You couldn't just, well, you could if you really wanted to just spam veterans in chimeras, but it was a thing that many veteran guard players soon learned. It was actually better to bring along a couple of platoons of guardsmen to add bodies to the field, and they were actually pretty good. Now, going forth into 8th edition, how am I organising my platoons these days? Well, when it first started, I was taking what was essentially, I would take a 30-man conscript blob and then take 10 infantry, or an infantry squad of 10 men and a veteran squad of 10 men. And that gave me 50 guys overall, and I'd normally back that up with an officer and a commissar and maybe a tank as well. But post FAQ, I've noticed that that combination isn't as effective anymore, especially since the commissar's obviously just been dropped from my list. It's just not useful anymore. And my platoons are a little bit in limbo, but I would definitely say it's almost time to go back to the fluffy quintessential platoon, and I've found that this has actually been quite effective. So what do I mean about that? Well, in the Imperial Guard fluff, and back in the day, back in 6th and 7th edition, it always seemed to be that the traditional decent sized platoon was always 3 infantry squads plus your command squad and commander. And I think that is the case again now. I would say that your basic infantry squad wants to contain, your basic infantry platoon, you want to take 3 infantry squads. Now, it's up to you how you equip them, but I would say the best, from experience, the best combination of heavy weapons and special weapons you want at the moment is a plasma gun and a heavy bolter in each squad. The plasma gun's cheap, it's only 7 points, there's no real excuse for taking grenade launchers. We've already covered that in other videos why we don't think grenade launchers are really worth it anymore. And the heavy bolter is cheap and it puts out 2 shots at close range, which is nice. And the heavy bolter puts out 3 shots and is also cheap. So that's a good squad to take. So I would take 3 of those. This is, taking post FAQ into account. Pardon me. So, post FAQ, you want to be taking, I'm thinking, 3 infantry squads. Then you want a command squad and a commander. Now, at the beginning of 7th edition, we weren't really taking command squads because they were fragile and mostly they were just used as some kind of special weapon delivery. But now I don't think that's the case. Now I think command squads are much, much better suited to carrying out some kind of support role. So what I'm thinking of here is you want a command squad with a with a flag, of course. Goes without saying, you want your regimental standard in there to give all you guys +1 leadership, and then you also want to have some kind of support element in there, whether it be special weapons or whether it be heavy weapons. I would still avoid things like the medic because he's not very good, and I would generally avoid Voxcasters. I just haven't really found a reason to take Voxcasters in 8th edition. So that's sort of the bare bones of the platoon. You want your 3 infantry squads. They provide you the bodies and a decent decent amount of firepower. Now, you want your command squad to give everyone a bit more of a backbone, because Leadership 7 Guard isn't really cutting it. Leadership 8 is kind of the minimum that you want. Now, for myself, I've generally found that that's almost enough. I take Mordian Iron Guard, which means I get +1 leadership anyway. So I'm rocking Leadership 9 Guard then, and that's normally enough. Leadership 9 Guard, that's normally enough. I mean, if you really want to, you can buff things up a little bit more, but generally that should be enough. Now, you need to add in your commander. Now, even though it's a platoon, and traditionally that would mean you want to take a platoon commander, I find in this case it's just not enough. It's just not enough. Oh, I should also say with command squads, I've been running them bare bones apart from the flag. One last thing I want to say, because I found that if I put special weapons in them, my opponents target them very quickly. But if I put just a flag in there, my opponents tend to think, well, it's only a flag, it's not such a big deal. It's only 4 guardsmen. I'd rather shoot at the guardsmen which are actually causing me problems. But going back to where I was, the commander, although traditionally you would take a platoon commander, it doesn't quite cut it in 8th edition, because platoon commander can only issue 1 order, and we've already got 4 squads in this platoon, and 1 order isn't enough. It's just not enough. So I've found that taking a company commander is the only viable option for your platoons. It just is. You need to be able to issue 2 orders. So what we've got there is almost a base platoon, but it's not quite enough. I feel like there's one last element to take to have a standard platoon of guardsmen these days, and that is a squad of veterans. Veterans are really, really good. I can't tell you how many times my opponents winced when I would open up with one of my veteran squads, and by the time they really figured out what was doing the damage to them, it was too late. The veterans were really good. Now, I am not sure what the best loadout for veterans is, because I've only really tried one loadout myself, and that is the triple plasma gun plus las cannon loadout. If you want to, you can swap the plasma guns down to melter guns, but I feel like plasma guns are better. Now, what that provides you with is a real proper anti-tank unit. The plasma gun heavy bolters in your infantry squads, they're not, they're not great just because you're hitting on a 4+ a lot of the time. But the veteran squad's hitting on 3s, and that's where you want one of your orders to be going. You want your commander to be issuing, probably take aim every single turn to your veterans, unless you're Cadian, in which case you probably don't need to do that. Probably order, bring it down so you've got rerolling 1s to hit and rerolling 1s to win, which would be nice. So that is what I am now taking as my standard infantry platoon, the bare bones. 3 infantry squads, a command squad with a flag to give a little bit of a leadership boost, and a veteran squad. Now, if we add all that up, it's actually relatively cheap. If we take into account, we're talking 55 times 3 plus 29 plus 119 plus 30. That's only 343 points for all that. And what that is bringing to the table for you is 45 infantry. That's pretty good. If you took a couple of those, you'd have all your infantry needs sorted for the majority of the people. I would be tempted to take 3 of them though. 3 of that formation will really help you round things out. Now, I think the minimum you want to be spending on a platoon is about, if you're really not bothered about the veterans, if your firepower is going to come from somewhere else, then you can manage the 119 points. And the minimum you want to be spending on a platoon is about 230 points, 224 to be precise. But the maximum you want to be spending on a platoon is about 500 points, because after that, you're generally just you're taking too many support elements. That's what I've learned is the key to running a successful platoon. You've got to balance between firepower and support elements. It can be too easy, and I've made this mistake myself, to go, right, well, I'm going to take my 3 infantry squads, and then my veteran squad, and then, I want to make sure that I've got special weapons and heavy weapons in my command squad. So let's take a las cannon and another plasma gun. And then I need to got to keep the men in line, got to make sure I never lose a single one. Got to take probably an inquisitor to keep them in line. But then I also want to be able to deny the enemy cover, so that needs an astropath. Then I also want to be able to cast decent psychic powers, so I've got to add a fucking guy in, a Primaris psycho in there as well. So you start getting on 500 odd points, and you haven't even really added any additional firepower to the platoon. You've got a load of guardsmen which are going to stick around a bit longer, and the enemy's going to have a little bit less cover, but generally you haven't increased the fire output of your army. So I just want to say it's really important when trying to build a platoon, in inverted commas, that you balance the support elements out. Now, going back to our original template of your 3 squads plus your veteran squad plus your command squad plus your commander, what would I add to this to round it out? Well, I would very simply, at the moment you've got 2 orders, which is enough to order around your veteran squad plus one of your infantry squads. Now, pardon me. Now, if you really want to, and I don't think this is a bad idea at all, the first and most simple upgrade to the platoon that I would take is another company commander. It's 30 points, so it's relatively cheap. Not busting the bank on your points, like I said, but it does mean that suddenly you're able to give orders to every single one of your infantry squads. Now, that's good. That's a lot of first rank fire, second rank fire you're going to be putting down. But bear in mind, your infantry squads are going to start dropping like flies very quickly. That means you're going to start having redundant orders all over the place. So it's not necessary to add a company commander. The one final advantage of adding the company commander, apart from it meaning everyone gets orders, is the fact that it then means you qualify to take a battalion detachment. And your single platoon is actually a bloody battalion, because you've got your 2 HQs, your 3 troops, and you've got a couple of elites in there. So that's pretty good. That was 373 points. You can fill out not a completely rubbish, actually a pretty good battalion. Now, you could take 3 of those. 2,000 point list, you could take 3 of those, and that would cost you 1,119 points. And you've got yourself 135 infantry, if not 138 infantry. That's a pretty good base, and it leaves you with over 800 points worth of 880 points of tanks and other stuff you want to take. So that's something to consider. But if you want to maybe take your platoon specifically, you want to build upon that platoon, outside of taking the extra commander, what you could then consider is taking a chimera or something similar. I've started to warm up to chimeras quite strongly for my platoons, because it gives me a bit of mobility, gives me a bit of extra armour on the field, but it generally also means it helps me protect against alpha strike. One of the big problems I've had in this edition is people looking at my veterans. Veterans are good, but when you start playing against the same opponents and they start learning how good veterans are, they start becoming a real high priority target. And it can really suck when your opponent knows to target your veterans, so they rip them apart really quickly. And then you start to struggle with the firepower, because what you've got to remember with the Imperial Guard is Ballistic Skill 4+ is generally the units that don't do a lot of damage, they absorb the damage. And Ballistic Skill 3+ are the units that do all the damage. So when you start losing that element of your platoon, you start to struggle with that firepower. So I do like to take a Chimera, so I have to warm into the idea. I drop the las cannon, I keep the 3 plasma guns, I have the Chimera, I stick the veterans in at turn 1, and then my opponent is either forced to troops from infantry squads, which I don't care about, or he blows at the Chimera, in which case most of the veterans pile out, and then I'm back in the game and I'm good to go. So, just something to mention. Now, so that's my sort of take on the competitive infantry platoon for 8th edition, post FAQ. You want your 3 squads of infantry, you want a few upgrades on them, because, you know, like a heavy weapon and a special weapon, because that means they are contributing to the fight and they're not just a waste of points. You don't want to spend too much on the support elements of platoon, because then it starts becoming inefficient. You shouldn't really be afraid of losing a few guys here and there to things like to enemy firepower and maybe a bit of battle shock. I mean, it hasn't affected me too much yet, but I am thinking of dropping the Inquisitors from my army and just, I'm spending about 200 points on Inquisitors, and the Inquisitors aren't doing anything. They're just sat there, stopping me from losing a guardsman here and there. It's not really a great investment in my points. So, just to summarise, what I have found to be a good post-FAQ platoon is 3 infantry squads, plasma, heavy bolter, veteran squad, triple plasma, las cannon, Chimera, and 2 company commanders and a command squad with a flag. That's what I found to be effective. And that comes to, and I'm talking Dakar Chimera obviously, and that comes to not using the Forgeal ones. 464 points. Now if you drop I would say if you're taking Chimeras, you probably only want to take about 2 of these. Maybe 3. If you took 3 of them, it would mean you'd have 3 battalion detachments, which is, 12 command points. You've still got 600 points left over. That's plenty to get yourself some support elements in there. Tank commanders or tanks, your choice. So, that's my take on the competitive platoon. What have you guys been running? Do you guys still tend to run your units in blobs? I honestly deploy my army as if it's 3 smaller separate armies. I honestly deploy my infantry squads, my veteran squads, Chimera, and normally a tank, and that goes in one, and that covers the left flank, and then I deploy exactly the same in the middle and exactly the same on the right flank. I don't even look at where my opponent's generally deploying his units, apart from to make sure I've got line of sight. So, have you guys been doing that, or do you guys tend to have much more diverse elements to your army? Are you guys still running platoons? If so, what have you found to be effective? 20 men? 30 men? 40 men? 50 men? Platoons? Are you running mostly infantry squads? Are any of you still using conscripts? What about veteran squads? And what some of you taking 10, for every infantry squad taking a veteran squad? That could be very powerful in terms of firepower. Please let me know what you guys are doing down in the comments, because I know this video has been maybe a little bit wishy-washy and it's just been sort of, this is what I found to be useful kind of stuff. But it's because this is sort of uncharted territory in 8th edition with the FAQ, and I know there's ways around it, but you pigeonhole yourself down to Valhallans, blah 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 blah. But what I'm trying to get at here is, let's all share the ideas that we have post FAQ for coming up with new ways of building our guard armies, because it's no longer the case of just conscripts, tanks, blah blah blah. So I know it's a bit wishy-washy, but that's because I'm sort of, I wouldn't say flailing around in the dark, but I'm sort of just hands outstretched, just feeling my way around, just trying to find out what works and what doesn't work. And it's great for me to get feedback from you guys to sort of, so if you guys say don't try this, it's completely useless, I know not to bother. And if I get some guy, you know, a lot of people telling me, oh my god, you wouldn't believe it, basic Tauruxes are absolutely amazing, go out and buy 10 of them, then I'll believe you and I'll try it out, kind of thing. So yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope it's been kind of useful. I've given you my thoughts on what I think is a good platoon. You guys tell me what you think is a good platoon. So thanks for listening, hope you found it useful, and I'll see you guys next time.